On a fateful day, a cold-blooded Yakuza assassin appeared to assassinate a member of the triad. However, he didn't expect to run into two FBI agents, John and Tom. The chase unfolded dramatically in the darkness. Rogue, the notorious assassin, shot John in the arm during the clash. As the assassin prepared to finish them off, luckily, Tom appeared just in time, causing him to fall into the river. Tom was convinced that with that fatal shot, the man couldn't survive, but his partner wasn't so optimistic. John understood Rogue's danger and cunning. He emphasized that those who had confidently claimed to have taken down this assassin were now all in the morgue. Nevertheless, finding his body in the dark, deep river was impossible, so they had to abandon the idea of searching below. 3 days later, when John's and Tom's families met to prepare for an outdoor party, the story of Rogue came up again. Although the police had searched the entire river, the security forces still hadn't found the assassin's body. Tom suggested that perhaps fish had taken care of all the traces, but John held on to his suspicion that Rogue might still be alive, merely hiding and waiting for a chance to take revenge on them both. And if so, not only them but their families would also be Rogue's targets. And then that suspicion quickly turned into horrifying reality. Just as the conversation ended, a masked man broke into Tom's house. He subdued Tom's wife and daughter, then dragged them into the bedroom. When Tom stepped outside, the man ambushed him from behind, catching him off guard. He dragged him in and locked him up with his wife and daughter. Giving the family no chance to resist or escape, the assassin acted brutally. Only a short while later, John's family arrived at the scene, but before them was a haunting sight. Dozens of police cars surrounding the house, now just a pile of burnt ashes. Rogue, the man thought dead, had perhaps returned, and this time he left no witnesses. John couldn't believe his eyes. He rushed into the scene with faint hope, but all that remained were the charred bodies of Tom's entire family. The shock was too immense for him to believe his friend's death. Just yesterday, they were sitting together planning to eat steak, yet now his close friend had been brutally murdered. As an FBI agent, John proceeded deeper into the scene, where he discovered a titanium shell casing bearing Rogue's characteristic marking. At this point, there was no longer any doubt. He became even more certain that the very assassin shot into the river had returned and was the one who had acted so brutally towards Tom's family. 3 years later, in a debaucherous nightclub controlled by the Yakuza gang, a mysterious man appeared. Wherever his footsteps went, the guards at the door collapsed. It seemed he was no stranger to this place. After passing through numerous areas of revelry, he entered the final den, where big-bellied Yakuza bosses were feasting with dancers. The assassin's entrance stunned all the portly figures in the room. Suddenly, a cold shot sent a fat man grilling chicken with a long-legged beauty to the afterlife. Immediately, the fattest boss ordered the attacked dogs to be released. But those hounds, after all, were just animals. How could they fight an assassin with a gun? The dogs were sent away permanently. A dog suddenly returned, carrying a gift around its neck, a bomb planted by the assassin. Before the crowd could realize the danger, the explosion tore the entire room apart, turning everything into chunks of meat. Even so, the fattest boss survived, barely breathing. And then he realized in horror that the man standing before him was none other than Rogue. He was once his most trusted subordinate, now turned into a traitorous assassin against the entire organization. But by the time the truth was revealed, it was too late, as the boss's life now lay in Rogue's hands. A final bullet was coldly fired by Rogue, finishing off the man who was once his boss. Rogue had returned, and this time he wasn't just killing people. He was declaring war on the entire underworld that had raised him. After the horrific explosion, police and FBI quickly arrived at the scene. Amidst the pile of corpses, they found one man lucky enough to survive. However, when interrogated about what happened, he was too weak and couldn't provide anything useful. He just weakly groaned fragmented sentences suggesting that if he were to meet that man again, he'd rather die now. His words served as an alarm bell for John, especially when he found a bullet casing at the scene, the same type Rogue had used to shoot him and murder Tom's family 3 years prior. At this point, John knew for sure Rogue had resurfaced, and this time he was much more dangerous. For the past 3 years, John had never given up searching for him, but Rogue always remained deeply hidden, as if vanished from the world. Now, with that brutal massacre, he had not only revealed himself, but officially declared war on John. Ironically, because he was so focused on this endless hunt, John had neglected his own family. His marriage consequently fractured. His wife grew increasingly dissatisfied and distant, the home he once protected now no longer intact. Back at the FBI office, John introduced a new agent, an elite marksman recruited to assist in this mission. An emergency meeting was immediately convened. He presented the entire plan to hunt down Rogue to the team. He said that he was not an ordinary assassin and operated very shrewdly. He was obsessed with changing his face. Every 6 months, he underwent surgery to alter his appearance, making tracking him even more impossible. Furthermore, this man was believed to have close ties with 2 notorious international criminal organizations. On the Japanese side was the Yakuza, led by Shiro, a powerful crime boss with influence from Asia to Europe. On the other side was the Triad, a dark force in Asia commanded by Li Chang. Initially, these 2 organizations had cooperated closely, carrying out numerous major operations from human trafficking and kidnapping to transnational drug dealing. And now, amidst that shady relationship, Rogue was the trump card, or perhaps a dangerous pawn that neither could control. Everything began to change from a bloody incident 30 years ago, when Shiro ordered his Yakuza subordinates to massacre Li Chang's entire family. Not stopping there, the boss plundered all of the Li family's valuable assets, selling everything on the black market and to museums. Of the family fortune, only a few ancient statues and prized horses remained. That deep-seated hatred had fueled Li Chang's desire for revenge for 3 decades. Recently, he discovered Shiro was trying to sell the remaining horses, and this was the clue to track down his enemy's whereabouts. In another development, Rogue, dressed impeccably, appeared at Li Chang's office seeking employment. Knowing Rogue was once Shiro's trusted henchman, Li Chang was wary. But the man calmly asserted that he had never been a loyal subordinate to anyone, so he couldn't be considered a traitor. He pledged to help Li Chang achieve revenge. With cold determination, he convinced the Triad boss, as they both shared Chinese blood after all. Nevertheless, Boss Li Chang remained cautious and assigned 2 trusted henchmen to accompany him, ostensibly to assist, but his real purpose was to use them to monitor Rogue's every move. Meanwhile, in Japan, Shiro, the cold-blooded dictator, was practicing martial arts in his private mansion. Even a small mistake by a subordinate could lead him to act brutally if his underlings displeased him. To ensure the deal involving the ancient horses, Shiro decided to send his own daughter to San Francisco to supervise. He only trusted his family and wasn't comfortable assigning the task to outsiders. This showed the boss was extremely shrewd and cautious. He was no ordinary man, having held the position of Yakuza leader for decades. At the same time, in San Francisco's Chinatown, John had also arrived. He followed the trail to an underground boxing gym to meet Benny, an old acquaintance of his. He was an arms dealer and black market information broker, holding many secrets from Interpol. Benny revealed that recently, people connected to Rogue had been strangely vanishing one by one. Officially, the police considered these mere suicides, but anyone perceptive who dug deeper would realize they were all targeted assassinations. Another noteworthy point, Benny added, was that most victims were doctors who had performed plastic surgery on Rogue. He must be trying to erase all traces of his identity. Now only one last doctor remained, his fate unknown. That night, Shiro's henchmen proceeded to transport the ancient horses. They disguised the valuable cargo by placing it inside cars, then hiding them in container trucks to easily pass through checkpoints. Everything seemed perfectly arranged, as they had spent considerable money bribing both local and international police. However, upon reaching a checkpoint, the convoy was unexpectedly ordered to stop for inspection by police forces. Shiro's men began to panic. Why would the dirty cops betray them? One of the men transporting the illegal goods expressed outrage at being stopped by the police. This man questioned an officer. The cop casually replied that he urgently needed money, making the whole group burst into scornful laughter. Thinking it was nothing major, just these guys wanting to extort a bit more money. Just when they thought everything was resolved, Shiro's group was suddenly gunned down on the spot by this very same police officer. It turned out they had been bought by Rogue beforehand. He was paid a higher price by Rogue and was willing to betray them to play both sides, selling out Shiro's men. Because the ambush was unexpectedly successful, to reward the 2 henchmen and Rogue, Li Chang not only gave Rogue a suitcase full of US dollars, but also added a hot reward. The next morning, the scene of the firefight at the checkpoint was cordoned off by regular police forces. John was also present there. He silently observed the scene. With his extensive experience, he easily noticed an anomaly. Shiro's men were fully armed, yet none of them managed to draw their weapons to defend themselves. This indicated they did not suspect the ones who killed them, meaning the killer could be someone they trusted implicitly. Wasting no time, John went inside and dragged the dirty cop out for interrogation. After using his professional techniques to threaten the dirty cop, the man finally admitted he was threatened with harm to his wife and children, forcing him to follow orders. But what he didn't know was that messing with Shiro meant his life was effectively over. The Japanese mafia are known for always avenging grudges. Just as John predicted, the moment the cop stepped out of the police station, he was immediately shot down on the spot. The shooter was none other than Rogue. Rogue immediately pursued John amidst the smoke of gunfire, across rooftops and narrow alleys. But after a thrilling chase, he lost track of Rogue again. The only trace left behind was a special bullet casing. After losing the valuable shipment completely, Shiro's henchmen were extremely furious. They discussed plans for a counterattack to retaliate against the Triad. However, just then, Shiro's daughter, the one he sent over to oversee the entire operation, arrived. She ordered the entire group to temporarily hold back, not to act rashly, because the most necessary thing now was to assess the situation and wait for the right moment. Although the subordinates seemed unwilling to follow the order, they had no other choice. With just a few sharp, cold threats, she made them all tremble, almost wetting their pants in fear. In another development, John unexpectedly received a call from Rogue. Over the phone, Rogue revealed that the goods stolen by the Triad were currently hidden in warehouse number 16. Immediately, John led his men to the scene, using FBI authority to inspect the warehouse. However, when the door opened, what awaited them was an empty space, with no goods inside. The only thing John saw in the warehouse was Rogue. This encounter made John's blood boil. He always hated Rogue because this was the man who killed Tom, his closest friend, as well as murdered his entire family. The hatred burned so intensely that John just wanted to pull the trigger and end the demon right there. But as an enforcer of justice, John had to restrain himself. He gripped the gun tightly in his hand. Nevertheless, in that moment facing the assassin, looking deep into Rogue's eyes, John felt something very familiar, as if he had seen those eyes every day in the mirror. However, he couldn't explain the feeling. He simply attributed it to the consequence of harboring hatred for too long. With no evidence, no clues, the FBI had to retreat in anger. After the incident of tricking the FBI ended, Li Chong couldn't hide his surprise upon seeing Rogue had correctly predicted the FBI would come. Once again, Rogue had saved them from a surprise attack, helping Li Chong narrowly escape danger. The trust Li Chong placed in Rogue grew stronger, but he had no idea that it was all part of Rogue's plan. After the spectacular deception by the Triad, John returned in extreme anger. He had stood before his enemy but could do nothing, even though for 3 years he had relentlessly pursued him like a shadow. Yet, all John got in return was absolute zero, watching helplessly as Rogue slipped through his fingers. He couldn't vent his anger on anyone. John could only unleash his frustration on the shooting targets on the wall, as if wanting to explode with all the emotions pent up over time. However, the Triad's tragedy did not end there. The following night, on their turf, as Li Chang's henchmen were gathered chatting, a mysterious motorcyclist suddenly appeared. This person revved the engine repeatedly, provoking and challenging as if seeking death. Faced with such reckless behavior, Li Chang's men couldn't sit still and immediately jumped on their vehicles to give chase. The pursuit lasted through many alleys until the motorcyclist skillfully lured them straight into Yakuza territory, a deadly ground everyone was wary of. And as expected, a fierce clash erupted. The Triad members thought this was a provocative tactic from the Yakuza. Meanwhile, the Yakuza subordinates believed the Triad dared to brazenly bring people over to cause trouble, especially after the previous incident where the Triad brazenly stole the precious ancient horses. In a short time, almost all of Li Chang's henchmen were eliminated. Only one long-haired man, Li Chang's closest confidant, managed to survive. But as soon as he saw Rogue emerge from the shadows, he froze, realizing his boss had trusted the wrong person. However, it was all too late. The next morning, the scene was completely cordoned off by the FBI. Observing the brutal scene, John quickly determined that this was undoubtedly a bloody purge carried out by the Yakuza against the Triad. Predicting that Li Chong would not let this rest and would soon retaliate, John immediately ordered tactical teams to set up ambushes throughout the tea house area, considered the Yakuza's den, to await the upcoming revenge. An underground war was silently building, ready to explode at any moment between the three forces spanning from Asia to Europe. At this time, at Li Chang's private residence, he understood clearly that after the theft of the ancient horses, the Yakuza would certainly not let it go. To him, last night's bloody event was just a cowardly revenge staged by the Yakuza as a warning. In this tense situation, Li Chang demanded Rogue pledge to absolutely protect his wife and children, to which Rogue nodded in agreement. However, to avoid adding fuel to the fire, Li Chang still ordered his subordinates not to retaliate at this time. But the situation quickly spiraled out of the boss's control, because the person killed in last night's clash was the younger brother of one of Li Chang's most trusted subordinates. Rogue secretly provoked him, causing the subordinate, driven by a blood feud, to ignore his boss's orders. That night, he led a group to secretly raid the Yakuza tea house for revenge. At that moment, several of Shiro's men were casually preparing dinner when they were suddenly ambushed. In just a few minutes, the peaceful tea house turned into a bloody battlefield where the two gangs settled their grudges. FBI agents monitoring from a distance detected the unusual situation and immediately reported it to John. Hearing the news, John drove like lightning to the scene. The chaotic battle showed no signs of cooling down. It wasn't until the FBI directly intervened that the clash was temporarily brought under control. However, some tough and stubborn survivors continued to resist fiercely, making the scene breathtakingly chaotic. A female agent was taken hostage, but with her professional composure, she quickly turned the tables and narrowly escaped danger. In a moment of carelessness, a man thought to be down suddenly rose up, almost sending John to meet his ancestors. Fortunately, Goy appeared just in time and provided cover, helping John quickly regain control of the situation. Just when he thought everything was settled, John suddenly heard gunshots from behind. John began to suspect that Rogue himself was the shooter. He wanted to eliminate everyone involved so no one could reveal any weaknesses about his true identity. John immediately handed the scene over to his colleagues to handle, then got in his car and pursued Rogue through several city blocks. The chase between the two skilled combatants was breathtaking. Not only did they engage in a top-tier gunfight, but both also displayed driving skills seemingly straight out of a Special Forces training course. However, it seemed Rogue didn't just want to escape. He deliberately provoked his opponent. While speeding through winding roads, he maintained a relaxed demeanor as if enjoying a game. Finally, not wanting to prolong the game, Rogue suddenly swerved dangerously, catching John off guard. The car lost control, crashed hard into the roadside divider, and was heavily damaged, forcing him to stop the pursuit. Rogue once again escaped narrowly. After successfully inciting chaos that caused heavy losses to the Triad, Rogue returned to the Yakuza headquarters in the U.S. Here, Shiro's daughter, the new leader in the shadows, expressed great satisfaction with what Rogue had accomplished. Without hesitation, she gave him his next mission: eliminate Li Chang and bring back the heads of his wife and children to present to Shiro. Fearing his true identity would be exposed, Rogue was forced to accept the order, setting off with a group of henchmen assigned to escort him. Back at his own home, John worried Rogue would target his family, just as he had massacred Tom's family years ago. Therefore, he assigned several police officers to protect his wife and son. However, this sparked an argument between the couple. His wife was angry because for many years, John had paid no attention to the family, and now he was bringing more trouble and danger home. Just as the atmosphere grew tense, John received a call from Benny. Benny reported that he had found the whereabouts of the doctor who performed plastic surgery on Rogue. He was currently hiding in a slum area in Mexico. Both immediately headed there. However, hopes for a breakthrough quickly died out when the doctor admitted he knew nothing more about Rogue. He only remembered that 3 years ago, a man with a disfigured face came to him, requesting surgery to change his appearance, and since then, they had completely cut off contact. The important clue they thought they had grasped turned out to be just a dead end, and the mystery of Rogue, the faceless, identityless man, deepened. That night, at Li Chang's private residence, everything seemed peaceful. He had just given some necessary instructions to his wife and children before going out for work, completely unaware that Yakuza members had secretly infiltrated from outside. A longtime trusted disciple of Li Chang suddenly appeared with a gun in hand. This man felt bitter because after years of loyalty to his boss, he ultimately received only contempt. However, before he could act, Li Chang quickly drew his gun. Unfortunately, he was a step too slow. The bullet had already left the barrel and ended his life in an instant. Just then, Rogue unexpectedly appeared and attacked the traitor, subduing him on the spot. Li Chang thought Rogue had come to save him once again, but as he stood up, he didn't expect Rogue himself to be the one sending him to the afterlife with several fatal shots. After finishing off Li Chang, Rogue went straight to the bedroom where his wife and child were panicking. Without a word, he coldly fired 2 shots. The Yakuza henchmen outside heard the gunshots, assumed Rogue had completed the mission, and suspected nothing. However, Rogue spun around and cleaned them all up in a lightning-fast massacre, leaving no time to react. Almost half the men in black were taken down immediately. The rest, though wanting to resist, were completely outmatched by Rogue's skill and were quickly eliminated as well. Unfortunately, the entire bloody scene was recorded by FBI personnel and immediately sent to John. At the same time, John also received classified information. Boss Shiro had personally come to the U.S. Giving him no time to breathe, John and the FBI raided the hotel just as the old man was unpacking his luggage. When confronted, Shiro maintained an arrogant attitude until John threw a stack of photos in front of him showing Rogue, his most trusted disciple, slaughtering his own organization's men. Dealt such a heavy blow, Shiro couldn't help but be stunned. But being a savvy figure in the underworld, he didn't lose his composure and immediately prepared a reward for Rogue. When Rogue came to meet Shiro, bringing the 2 horses, he received a suitcase of money and a set of photos showing he had been secretly photographed. Even though his secret was exposed, Rogue remained calm, as if he had been waiting for this day for a long time. Knowing he couldn't let the matter be revealed, Shiro ordered Rogue imprisoned in a special detention area for interrogation. However, just as he was being escorted to the detention cell door, Rogue exploited an opening from the guard, using the revolving door itself as a weapon. After a fight, he took down the guard with an iron will component and then used a remote control to activate the bomb previously planted in the horse statue suitcase. The explosion destroyed Shiro's entire house, but unfortunately, it still didn't kill the cunning old fox. Shiro couldn't understand why someone he had nurtured like Rogue would turn his back and betray him. At this moment, Rogue finally revealed the truth hidden for the past 3 years. In reality, he was Tom. The real Rogue had died 3 years ago and had become a charred corpse after the assassination. And Tom, who had lost his entire family at the hands of the assassins sent by Shiro himself, had taken Rogue's place to wait for the day of revenge. He had played the role of the assassin for 3 years, and now it was time for the game to end. It turned out, on the day of the tragic incident, he hadn't hesitated to take the assassin's life. After witnessing his wife and child being murdered, he coldly took the ring from his own finger and put it on the killer's hand, then doused the house with gasoline and burned it down, erasing all traces. Leaving the scene, he changed his appearance and used Rogue's identification papers to infiltrate the Yakuza organization, step by step penetrating the enemy's den, waiting for the day to avenge his wife and child and find the person who had revealed his true identity, a former undercover FBI agent. The terrible truth was finally revealed when Shiro, in his final moments, disclosed a secret Tom was unaware of. The one who sold him out was none other than John, the man he once considered a blood brother, the one who had saved his life 3 years ago. This shock nearly broke Tom, because it was John who had betrayed him behind his back, indirectly pushing his entire family to their deaths. The greater the hatred, the more determined he was to finish off Shiro, the mastermind behind it all. After the bloody battle, at a wooden house where John's wife and child were hiding, they received a suitcase containing an ancient golden horse statue and a letter with the message, "Start a new life." Although the sender's name wasn't mentioned, everyone understood it was Tom. At the same time, Shiro's daughter also received a similar suitcase, but the gift inside was her father's severed head, like a final act of revenge. The score with his old friend came to light. Tom called John, arranging to meet at the pier, the place that marked a milestone in their friendship when Tom saved John's life years ago. However, John had secretly informed Goy for backup. When the two faced each other, there was no time for explanations. They immediately lunged at each other with overflowing rage. One yearned for revenge against the betrayer who shattered his family. The other believed his opponent was the culprit who destroyed his friends' loved ones' lives. The decisive battle between Tom and John lasted half a day without a clear winner. Only when Tom screamed the truth buried for so many years, directly accusing John of revealing his undercover FBI identity, did the fight temporarily halt in a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. Initially, John didn't believe the man standing before him was Tom, his old friend, until he looked deep into those eyes. Because while doctors could change the face, voice, and physique, the eyes were the one thing that couldn't be faked. The moment he realized it was indeed Tom, memories flooded back, and John suddenly understood why he always felt an indescribable sense of familiarity whenever he looked at Rogue. That year, John worked for Shiro and was lured by the empty promise that if he just revealed Tom's identity, Shiro would teach him a light lesson, absolutely not endangering his life. But tragedy struck when Shiro coldly ordered Rogue to murder Tom's entire family. And when everything came to light, it was too late. Although filled with regret, John was still the traitor, the one who pushed his best friend's family onto the path of death. It was a sin that no apology could ever redeem. Just then, John noticed a red laser dot aimed at Tom, a sign that Tom was in a sniper's crosshairs. In a final moment, to atone for his mistake, John lunged forward to shield Tom with his own body. But unexpectedly, Tom quickly drew his gun and fired a fatal shot. The bullet caused John to collapse on the spot. It's unclear whether John survived or not. But what is certain is that the friendship between them ended forever at the very place that once held memories of going through life and death together. In the end, Tom drove off in a supercar, carrying a suitcase full of cash. Perhaps after settling the old scores, he would start a new life, a life free from resentment, free from blood and tears. The film closes, leaving the audience with a deep sense of regret for a friendship that seemed eternal but ultimately shattered due to misplaced trust. The affection John had for Tom might have been real, but his gullibility led him into the trap of an evil man like Shiro, forcing him to pay the price with both friendship and honor. And whatever the reason, betrayal remains a wound that can never be erased. A film ending full of emotion, leaving viewers pondering, should trust ever be given completely? Thank you for following until the very last moments.